All right. We're here, BJ McKay here. We have a couple guests, as you can see, some familiar faces, one maybe not so familiar face, and we'll get to know everybody here in just a second. But today's focus, before we get into who's who here, if you have an athlete, a male or female athlete, in like late elementary school, going into middle school, that you see playing high school sports, that you see playing college sports, that you see becoming your age at some point, this is a great podcast and some great resources for you. We're going to basically be following with our guests here the kind of the genesis story of an athlete from like a strength and conditioning, mobility, movement, everything you would want to hit to take care of an athlete, particularly off the field. So if you like what you see today, by all means, subscribe. Share it out to folks to connect them with us, and that's kind of the thrust of what we're going to accomplish today. So let's start with our first guest here that we haven't met yet. This is Jason Roberson. Jason, just in short, tell them who you are and maybe why you're here.
I'm a guy that loves to work out. I happen to have a job that's beautiful. I work for Ball State University. I'm the director of strength and conditioning there.
All right.
It's a passion, you know. It's one of those things that I think I should have done it my entire life. I didn't realize until later. I didn't realize until after college. If I'd known at an earlier age that this would be something I'd be good at, I would have started, you know, in high school and worked my way towards this beginning then. But you know, at the time, I bought into convention and thought I was going to be a lawyer or something. Yeah. Clearly, that failed through. So. But once I figured out what I wanted to do, I just delved, you know, head first and got better and better and better. And I've learned as much as I could since then.
That's excellent. How long have you been there?
I've been at Drake now I've been at Ball State for
I guess we know where you were before.
Yep, I was at Drake University for that. But I've been a strength conditioning coach now in the professional ranks for 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah, and so it's been a long-lived, loved career.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
That's great.
To be here.
And who are you?
I'm just another guy.
We found him on the street before we walked in.
I'm Eric Van Mater. I'm head coach at Muncie CrossFit at the Arsenal. I actually have a master's degree in sport performance, so I actually learned under Coach Roberson here. And he was also my strength conditioning coach for a couple of years at the end of my baseball career at Ball State. So I luckily did get into it at a little bit younger age. I got into it right into college, developed a passion because it was the area I knew that I struggled the most with going into the collegiate level. I was a cross-country runner, weighed about 140 pounds at 6'2", and knew that I needed to get stronger. So going to the D1 level, it just something I kind of picked up on and decided I wanted to make a career out of it. And as I went and learned, I realized how much deeper I could take it, especially being around Coach Roberson. He kind of helped open that up to me. And I've kind of traveled around and been a couple different places on the east side of the country and found my way back here home to Muncie, Indiana, where I met you.
All right, that's great. And the role I played today is, as some of you that are watching this that know me, I am a coach. I am a coach in a lot of facets. I coach people's businesses. I coach entrepreneurs. I coach people in psychology, behavior management, habits, developing skills, sales, negotiation, all those things. But I'm also a certified coach for lifting weights and CrossFit and all those different things. So it's a fun melding of worlds that I get to be here. So I'm sitting here as a parent of athletes. I'm sitting here as an athlete myself, a master's athlete myself. I'm here as kind of half a hat as a coach, which you don't need much of me today with the two gentlemen here. Eric works with a lot of high school, middle school athletes, we're going some college athletes over at our gym. And then Jason predominantly works with Division I college athletes. So what's cool is we have a panel here. You have a parent. Jason's also a parent of an athlete too. Yeah. He's got both ends. So it's kind of a lot of different perspectives you can gather from, where we always get into the weight room. And this guy's, I think you hear this, well, what should my kid be working on? What should they not be working on? Oh, could you believe the coach did this? And should I be worried about that? So hopefully today we're going to get to kind of like myth bust or like demystify, well, what should you even care about?
Yeah.
People are going to make mistakes. There's a lot of good programs. How much can a baseball coach know about strength and conditioning? Like, what's your coach at a middle school level? What can we expect from that that's reasonable? And as a parent, what can we walk away from this with to actually put our kids in the best situation to predominantly be injury-free, which I think is undersold for kids, but also perform well and still like sports, which I see a lot of the burnout with parents that like, well, they'll do this, and this. I'm like, well, they're doing like 3 hours of stuff a day, huh? They still like it?
It's not going to last long.
We make them go. It's good for them. Like, do they like it? Do they want to do it? So I guess if we start at the front end of that, and I guess I'll start with you, Jason, on this one. So what should, if I have like a middle school athlete male or female athlete, middle school athlete coming up, ages whatever or grades, whatever, 6th to 8th grade. Like, what are the top things that you think are the best practices or things that I should be working on with them? Or if maybe I'm in my own home gym or I'm at the Y or I'm somewhere else, what are the things that I should be focused on to get them some readiness for the sport that they're playing?
So that's a great question. I got to coach my daughter's softball team, and so I got to be around middle school athletes and work with them. The number one thing that I would say that I saw with these athletes is how poorly they moved. Everybody wants to go, hey, let's pick up some weights and get strong. I want my kid to look like a college kid. Well, your kid doesn't have what a college kid has yet. They haven't matured like a college kid has yet. But what your kid can do is learn how to move really, really well. And so for me, when I was working with these young athletes, the biggest thing I wanted to teach them was how to move well. Can you hinge? Can you squat? Can you walk? Can you change directions? Can you keep your balance when, turning your head? Can you keep your balance when moving straight ahead? There's lots of different things that we could teach athletes at that age that have nothing to do with the weight room, yet. And I'm not saying that being in the weight room is not the thing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm simply saying that if you can't control your body, you have not earned the right to control exterior loads, and so make sure you can move your body really well. Make sure you can control your movements really, really well. Once you do that, you get the reward, baby. Let's get strong.
Right. Well, so given that that's a common fault that you see kind of like roaming the fields right now, what are some of the ways, if again, speaking to a parent that could be listening to this, what are some of the ways that I can address that? Like, I guess, why isn't it not being taught, told, promoted? Like, what are the things that I can do to do that with my youth athlete?
Ooh, that's a great question. I can speak from my experience. When I was in middle school and high school, Nebraska was the team the football team to beat. That was the team, and everybody wanted to do what Nebraska did. And so in high school and in middle school, I was put on a Nebraska football strength program. Looking back, at the time, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I was like, oh my God, I'm doing the same thing these college kids are doing.
Yeah, right.
Looking back, that was the dumbest thing that I could have done. Not knowing that, obviously, and the coaches didn't know that. So the answer to your question is this. It's not sexy to stand there and learn how to hinge. There's nothing in your hands. There's nothing in your body. I mean, you're just simply learning how to move your body really well. And so it doesn't look as productive as it does if you have a barbell on your back or a barbell in your hands or something of that nature. You're not swinging around and running, doing things that look fabulous. But what I'm here to tell you, and I'm telling you this for a fact, is that if you can move really, really well, those next steps, the Nebraska programs, they become easier. They become your body is ready and capable of doing those things really, really well. But if you don't take those first steps, I have to go back and fix those things when you come to me in college.
And at that point, I guess the assumption would be athletes are all locked up. They have the tighter hips. They have all these things that take a long time to undo. And
so instead of getting better once you get to your first year in college, you have to spend your first, possibly your second year, depending on how bad you were taught or how untaught you were, untrained you were, fixing all of those things, correcting all of those movement patterns, all those poor pattern behaviors before I can load you up and actually make you better as an athlete. And so if you start that young, the benefits are tremendous. And we asked about health and safety, making an athlete healthy and safe. If you want to prevent injuries, move well, move well. If you can always put yourself in a right place when you're trying to do any kind of movement, their chances of getting injured go down. Looking at, when we're talking about, say, sprinting, if you're sprinting down the field and you encounter a dip in the field or another player coming in front of you, something of that nature, your ability to hinge through your hip and knee and ankle, to lift or even to drive down to meet the ground instead of falling into it or falling over it, that's going to reduce an injury. But that's a learned skill. The ability to run is a learned skill. I never knew that as a young kid. I always thought everyone knew how to run. And honestly, I don't think I realized that even when I was first getting into my career as a strength coach. I always assumed, well, everybody can run. Now, I was a track athlete, so I knew that running fast was a skill. So you had to learn how to become fast. But I didn't realize that the simple act of putting your left foot in front of your right foot over and over again is a skill in and of itself.
Yeah, like foot placement.
Yeah.
Like, where do you go? Like, when do you do this? How do you avoid the heat? Like, there's so much to it. And then you're doing these drills. Like, why am I doing this again? Why am I doing this again? Yeah. And then after a while, you get on the 40 clock or you're running the 100-meter dash. I was like, oh, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, how'd that happen? I didn't get that much stronger. I didn't get that much faster. It was those mechanics.
Yeah.
That's terrific. I have a couple more questions before I do that. I'll ask Eric, like, what are your perspectives to the same question? You're there, I mean, because you're there every day working with these athletes, seeing it, programming, seeing a lot of these faults walk in, where I walk in, and Eric's coached me up on, like, when I watch a kid walk in, I'm watching how they walk toward me. I'm like, all right, here we go. It tells so much of the story when you're going, all right, good.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts, Eric?
So a lot of what he just said, I mean, that's really the foundation. I mean, if you've been around my program or seen the program I work with my kids, that's essentially what we do. I have to put a little bit of that sexiness involved because you're paying money to me, right? And parents want to see some of that early. So you have to kind of flirt a line a little bit. But with that being said, I require all kids to start on a baseline program. It's 2 different workouts. They learn how to squat. They learn how to hinge. They learn how to create power with dumbbell snatches, dumbbell jerks. It's all dumbbell, kettlebell, bodyweight movements. We do overhead walking lunges with PVC pipes, things like that. And when they're ready, then we move them up to the barbell or to heavier loads, but they have to earn that ability, right? I have a certain number and a certain standard that a kid has a test day that I have to, for them to move from a dumbbell to a barbell to a front squat barbell, let alone that. They don't back squat for a long time. But for a kid to move from a dumbbell to a front squat, they have to perform 3 sets of 10, full range of motion, great positioning, great technique, everything with a 40-pound dumbbell. Because then I know they have sufficient strength for me to then teach them with a 15-pound barbell. And then we can start loading that back up from there with a slightly different load position, slightly different stabilization position, but from the waist down, it's the same thing. Yeah. And so that's a lot of the principles that we apply with what we do. And that's a lot of why I do that, is because I know that not only am I going to set you up for better strength down the long run, I'm also going to help you be able to go lift better at your school with your teams when you move forward. I've had several athletes, my first position out of graduate school at Ohio, I had several athletes go off and play D1 football. I had 2 Notre Dame kids that when they went to school, they were already at junior level of their strength conditioning program.
And that was because of that moving well?
Because of moving well, yep.
Okay,
the foundation
great.
that we did and the foundation we built first, I made them move well before it started loading. No, don't get me wrong, once you do that and once we have it, like, let's have fun, let's load it. You know what I mean? But at the same time, like, if I'm trying to push that, your risk of injury goes high. You've already got a high risk of injury with a lot of the things we do in sport if you don't develop that basic foundation to begin with. So I want to make sure we cover that big foundation. It's like building a house. If you don't have a big sturdy foundation, how long is that house or that building going to stand, and how tall can you really go, right? So if I'm building a foundation as big as this table, that I'm not going to be able to build very tall. And so that's the problem. A lot of people want to skip out on that first step and want to just start loading and getting past that foundation stage, like, I'll fix it as I go. And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. When Julian, my son, who's 14, works with Eric, and just to watch him go full depth on a front squat with his elbows up high, his back straight, it's just like, I'm just like, man, I wish I would have known this. Like, I just wish. And then even still, I'm doing remediation on shoulder position, on like back position. And then parts of my body got strong. That it's not bad that it's strong, but now it's hindering because I use it as a magic eraser.
Yep.
Like, I don't know how to do that, so I guess I'll just do this, which isn't, but I mean, at some point, if I would keep pushing that, injury is the only end to that if I don't address it. But Eric's been so great about working that. And then you just watch the load go up, like, well, it's not moving much, but man, he's moving good. And I'm like, all right, now let's see what happens. And then sure enough, now he's huge and just doing a great job. And I'm like, wow. And he still's got the range of motion, like all the way down there. And I'm like, man, you're going to be so happy.
And that's the greatest part about working with kids, is that the adaptation period is so short. They can take so much information in, and they change their body position, they change their minds, they change how they do things in a really short amount of time. Like with us as adults, I could teach a 36-year-old or 40-year-old how to squat, and it may take me months or if not years to get into the position where I wanted to be in.
Yep.
But kids, some kids, you could teach them in a couple of days that, okay, here's what I want you to do. And they just take it in and they adapt. Once you've adapted to it, I'm not against weight training. I'm not saying that at all. Yep. I've been around some kids who are really, really strong, but they were strong because they were great movers.
Right. Well, let's take this down to specifics. I want to walk away with a few things. I'm going to get 6 of them from both of you. Okay. So we're going to get 3 from you, and I'm going to get 3 from you, Eric. And so, what are the 3? If you could be as specific as possible, what are the 3 biggest mistakes in youth strength training or sports performance training? What are the 3 things? If you could be specific, down to like an exercise you see overused, or like a coaching cue, or something that you see parents doing with kids. Any of them. Like, what are 3 of them? So if Eric, you had 3, and Jason, you had 3 or so. If I'm listening, I could walk away with, well, at least I'm not going to do these 6 things. And if you overlap, it's fine.
Yeah,
we'll have 1 less, All right, but you'll still get your value. So I don't know who wants to go first.
You mind if I start off?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, my number one thing is exactly what I said with what was done to me as a high school athlete. Do not look to elite athletes and expect a 12-year-old, 10-year-old, 9-year-old to do those things. Stick with basic skills. That's the level that they're at. You wouldn't teach a average 10-year-old calculus. They're not ready for it, but they can add and subtract.
Right.
Does that make sense? And so until they can do those little steps first, do not look to the elite athletes. And that's the problem that I see with most parents, coaches, is they look to the glass ceiling and go, I want my athlete to be that person. But everyone starts where they are now, or everyone starts at the bottom. Yep. And if you don't take those basic skills and build upon those basic skills, you're never going to be better. I was talking to Bubba yesterday, as a matter of fact, and we were talking about what he does at his school.
Who's Bubba?
Brandon Van Mater, actually.
Okay.
Sorry, I apologize for that. They probably need
Long
to know who
time
Bubba
nickname.
is.
All right, I got it.
It's hard for me. I'll be honest. Like around the gym, I try to call him Brandon. It's really awkward.
I can imagine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so we were speaking yesterday about what he does with his high school athletes, and he asked me what I do with my track athletes. And I explained to him what I did with my athletes. And obviously I'm at a little bit different level than what his athletes are. But what we both had in common was we still do basic movements. Still do these, nothing's fancy. We're not doing anything outlandish or crazy. We still do these basic movements. And he was like, yeah, I do that too. I just do it at this level. I'm like, perfect. That's perfect for your athletes because you know your athletes. I don't know them because if I were in your shoes, I probably would do that too. That would be my number one thing.
So number one is looking to what the pros do or the elite level athletes and immediately just trying to like carbon copy it to your kid. And the inverse of that would be back to just like drilling basic skills, like drilling these basic movement patterns to kind of address even what you started off today with, which move well.
Yeah.
Like that's number one.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely. That's my number one.
You want to go one for one?
Let's go one for
Sure.
one.
Okay.
Because I agree with that, but I want to add to that to kind of make it another one is move more as well, especially with what I see in kids today. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. They have to sit at school, right? They have to sit at a desk a lot. This will kind of follow up. I'll rewind back to the last question here in a second too, but they're just sitting in a desk a lot at school. And so when they do that, a lot of the hips, the hamstrings, things like that, the low back start to stiffen up. Well, if we don't move well and we don't move through full range of motion, that does a great job itself of just developing, that range of motion they need to help prevent injury. But especially in the hips and the ankles would probably be the two bigger ones that I would see, that I would say a lot. But with on top of them sitting at a desk, they also sit a lot with technology, video games, TV, all that stuff we have this day that, I didn't have my first smartphone until I was 25 or 26 years old, right? So the things that these kids have access to, it's awesome. It's great in a lot of things, but we also have a trade-off, right? A lot of things in life have trade-offs with them. And that's one is kids are starting to move less as well. And then when they move less and they're not moving well, things get stiff, things get tight. I actually had one of Julian's friends just start recently about a month ago. He came in with a ton of back pain. And we haven't really done anything special with him. He just was really, really stiff. He was very elastic. Like you can see in his step, the kid's fast. He's got a lot of spring in it, but he's just very stiff. And literally I've just taught him how to move better. And his back has not really bothered him when he does. It's when he goes out and does something, playing outside, stupid without warming up, just taking off on a full sprint or whatever, playing basketball. And it beats him up for maybe a day, but then he's fine, and it's decreased so much over that. But that's what I think a lot of it is kids don't move, they don't move well. And so when you get kids at that middle school age, especially when they start hitting that puberty range, you start seeing quick growth. And from my experience, when that happens and they're sitting a lot, they get really, really locked up. The great thing about it though is if you get them to move well and move often, you see that fast adaptation, right? We see fast changes in these children that, you get 30 plus, it's going to take me months to fix something like that, with direct intent that you can't really train much with. With a kid, we can still do some training and still create that adaptation or that, that range of motion and movement pattern a lot faster. So
it's almost like more time and more volume, like more time doing the activities on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
It's like that kind of consistency.
Yep.
I mean, and that rolls like with what I see in just basically emotional management and everything else, like all the habits you have to strong mental health and everything else that has to go along with your son or daughter going through something like this is, how do I manage that piece too? You don't change your habits in a day. Or you don't change your habits with these massive, tomorrow I'm never going to blank. I'm like, all right, you're already lying. You don't know it. I believe the intent, but it's like a 5 minute to 10 minute every day thing. which is I think that is the kryptonite to a lot of the programming I see, that it's just like a lot at once. And I'm sore. I'm going to take 3 days off and do what? Nothing. Interesting choice. And then how do they feel the third day? I'm even worse. I'm like tighter than I was before. I'm like, yeah, it's interesting. Which is like why if you took time off, like, well, I'm not going to drink like on during the weekday. You slip up on a Tuesday, and it's just like you're off the wagon, if you will. I think the same thing can happen with youth, and I think it can happen quicker because they're getting more stimulus. They're getting more demands on their time and attention.
Yeah.
So getting them to, hey, you're going to go to the weight room. Hey, you're going to go out to the field. Hey, we're going to go out and do all that stuff. Being out even is something that's not as common as it was for us, where it's like you wanted to find your friends. Well, where's the driveway with all the bikes in it?
Yep.
That's where it was. So I rode my bike. Like there was activity to get to the activity. Yep. And now it's like we can't even get together to play video games because I just put my headset on. And the only way I can play video games is if you're at your house.
Yeah.
Sitting, ruining the hinge motion in my hips. All right. So we have kind of volume, frequency, some of those things. Then Jason's was about like trying to use and just carbon copy elite programming and everything and missing the drill. So we have 2. Yeah. All right, so we'll go back to you.
Excellent.
What would be the second one for you?
So I'm actually going to add to what Eric was talking about. One of the questions I had for another article I wrote was, how do I get my athlete to jump higher? And everybody wants that special program, that really...
Ooh, the magic pill.
Where's the magic
comes.
pill?
Yep.
Right? And they were surprised with my answer. And my answer was this: jump every day. Find something to jump. If you have a kid... this is something that I did a lot, and I'm not saying I had a high vertical. I had a 34-inch vert at my best, my very best, a 34-inch vert, and so I wasn't some amazing jumper like that. But it's better than average, you know. But what I did every single day, now I can't say I did it every day, but I was that kid that always wanted to touch the door frame. So every time I'd walk out of my bedroom, I'd try to touch the door frame, and as soon as I could touch the door frame, I wanted to touch the ceiling, and as soon as I could touch the ceiling, I wanted to touch the top of the door frame outside my house that was higher than the ceiling. You know, it was just always, then it became the basketball net. You know, I want to touch the net. Okay, now I'm at the first rung of that net. I want to touch the second rung. You know, and so with my daughters, I have a dancer and a volleyball player and a swimmer. She's a swimmer as well. And so what I'm doing with my daughters this summer is I'm actually setting up remember the tape touches in the weight room? Yeah. So in the weight room at Ball State, I actually had pieces of tape hanging from the ceiling. It's an 11-foot ceiling. I had one at 10 feet, 9.5, 9 feet. So hanging down from the ceiling. And we would literally just tell kids to walk in and go, okay, give me 5 tape touches. So you walk over and you go touch the tape 5 times. So with my daughters, I'm setting something of that nature in the backyard.
Oh, that's great.
I'm going to reward them. I'm an external reward kind of guy, simply because I understand external rewards tend to work really well. And so I'm going to pay them for every inch they gain, you know. And
you've almost already set the ceiling for how much you're going to pay. You know, there's only, and if they break that through, it's worth every penny.
It's worth every penny. Absolutely. Absolutely. If I can get my volleyball player to touch 10 feet, that's scholarship time. And that's where coaches are going to be looking for. If I can get my dancer to improve her leap by 6-7 inches, now that's more time in the air until her dramatic movements become much greater.
Right.
And so it's all payoff, you know, for doing this. And so I'm setting this up, and each day they're going to go out and touch, you know, and it's not a matter of me telling them to, because they want the money. And
right.
So it makes it much easier for me to go, okay, $20.
That or do the dishes. I'll go jump. Right.
And so, so my thing would be this: get your kid to jump every day. If you want your kid to be powerful, get your kid to jump every day.
So I guess the same would be true for, like to a degree, if my son's a football player, like throwing, or if I want to be faster, I run. If I do, like, you can kind of like figure out that thing in whatever sport specialty it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I would even think like my, like if I'm in band or something and I'm playing some sort of wind instrument or a horn, like lung capacity, like blowing out, like I think that all those same principles would apply. Like,
or even aperture. You know, I've read stories about Miles Davis. He would walk around with rice in his mouth and he would spit the rice to work on his aperture.
Oh, goodness.
And so, you know, you learn that, you know, you gain that muscular control. And that's all we're talking about here is muscular control.
Control.
You learn that muscular control, and all of a sudden you can do greater things than anybody else who do not have that type of muscular control. So absolutely, any skill set you're looking to develop, you know, practice it regularly.
Excellent. So it's do that and then try to find ways to do it every day. Yeah. I like it.
Yep.
All right, back to you. Here's the baton.
So I'm going to go a little bit different route with this, but I think this is really important. I think it goes along with it, that I think a lot of kids miss, especially nowadays too, is the nutrition side of things. I think the food aspect. This is something I've been talking to a lot of my middle school kids the last week or two, is eating. A lot of them just aren't eating enough. And now that they're starting to, I have a handful of kids that have earned their way to the barbell the last couple of weeks. And so now that they're getting a feel, they're starting to move better. They're starting to want to load the bar. And I'm cool with that. I like that. But at the same time, if we want to recover and build muscle, and even just get stronger, right? Not necessarily build muscle, just get the ability to train harder and pick up bigger weights, that requires fuel. And you don't put in, lawnmower fuel into, a jet engine, right? Like, you want to make sure that you're fueling your body well and fueling enough of it. And that's one thing I see, especially with kids, is not getting enough nor the quality of what they need.
Yeah.
I use the analogy a lot with the kids. It's like building a house, right? You need materials, you need tools, and you need workers, right? Well, you're your worker. The gym and the equipment in there is your hardware, your tools. But if you have no supplies, you can bang on a hammer all day, and you're not going to build anything, right? If we don't have enough food in the system, you're not going to get stronger. You're not going to put on size. You're not going to do any of the things that we're in there trying to do. So
and how many of those kids walk in? Oh yeah, I forgot to eat after school today.
Yep.
Oh yeah, I missed lunch today. I'm sorry. It's like, and you're seeing, like, you probably even seen in college, like, they're just anemic, and you're just like, are you good? Yeah, I forgot to eat. It's like, oh yeah. It's like as if like just an afterthought when your tank goes to eat, and you're wondering why I can't push it out. It's like, geez. All right. So we got nutrition, and I think we're living in, like, at least as far as human history has begun, the kind of golden age of being able to have access to good tasting, like food, like to get whole food, to get clean food. There's just so many resources online and otherwise, to get that for your kids, where it's like you don't have to sacrifice taste, which kids love the taste of sugary.
Yep.
They like the main, like salty, like all those things, like that's what they like. If you just do a little bit of homework, you can find something that they'll hook onto, so that they're not pounding down like their third bowl of Fruity Pebbles, which, by the way, I don't blame them. They're awesome. But it's like, that's called a cheat meal.
Yeah.
You get one of those. All right, good one. Yes. All right, here's your third.
All right,
biggest mistakes.
Biggest mistakes that I see parents make is they try to get their athlete to do one sport at the age of 7. Diversify.
What do you want to do with the rest of your life? I don't know.
But they're going to be a softball pitcher. I know that for a fact.
That. This is the one thing we're doing.
Oh, no.
Why is that a mistake?
The biggest mistake, especially when we see it here at college, when I get to the college level, is you have athletes that have done one movement over and over again. So they're really physically strong in that movement. And so now they're being asked. So say if they're asked to do something that's not that movement, that's when an injury occurs. We talk about injury and how to prevent injury. The best way to prevent injury is to build an entirely strong and fit body. If that body has only done one thing its entire life, it's not physically strong, and it's certainly not fit. And so diversify your movements. I'm not saying they have to be on 7 different clubs, but I am saying that if they play softball or baseball, or basketball, take your kid out and throw a frisbee around with them. Take your kid out and throw a football around with them. If they don't play baseball or anything like that, take them out and throw a ball around with them. It's not hard. My daughter just recently decided she wanted to play tennis for her high school team. It's not something serious. We're having fun. She just enjoys it. I encourage my daughter to do as many different movement sports as possible. And so I'm out there hitting a tennis ball with her. I don't know anything about tennis, but I'm sure hit the ball with her any day I can, any day she asks me.
Right.
Because I want her to learn new skills, or I want her to practice new skills, and I want her to move in as many different ways as possible.
Right. No, I like that. And it's like, you think about like when summer rolls around, like swimming.
Oh God.
Going in, getting into the pools, and get your kids out there, like to go in the water, go swimming and things like that. Or like hiking. Like going into the woods, like hiking with people. There's all. The next thing you know, they're not only hiking, they're hiking and climbing. They're hiking, climbing, and jumping. They're doing all of these things happen when they're just like, well, you don't have. We just went on a walk.
That's a heck of a walk, though.
You know what I mean? It's like there's
Beautiful
so
walk,
many opportunities, and I think it's interesting because I think that's something that I see as a parent. With a lot of different activities, sometimes you can struggle to even spend time with your own kids.
Yeah.
So when you're spending time with your own kids, if they're sitting down most of the time, to Eric's point earlier, that might be a prime opportunity to go out and get some movement yourself. If you're a parent, like, hey, let's go do this thing. Let's go try that thing that we'll do, and make that our thing. Be it a walk or a run or a jog, or going down to a park and playing frisbee, throwing a ball, doing something like that. Honestly, I think the thing I run into when I'm doing coaching of professionals is people calcify in that they're afraid to do things they're terrible at.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, go out and throw the ball poorly. Go out and throw it poorly and then go get, like, that's how you get better at things. And by the way, when's the last time your kid saw you do something and just suck at it? And I think that's not healthy for a kid to think, well, you just have it all figured out. Like, cause no, I don't. Like, you ever see me try to play piano? Watch. Oh my, it's just terrible. Well, let me show you something else. Why are you so bad at that? Well, I never started.
Yeah.
I never practiced it. So here's me showing you, but you're so good at this. Let me tell you how many thousands of hours I've spent deliberately focused on that thing to get better at it. But you're also good at all these things, all these other sports. Yeah, because I did that and I played this and I played football and I did that and I did like rode the BMX bike around. And I learned how to do a skateboard. All those things, like, I think line up. But I think that's like, those are kind of like the neglected things on the outside because, well, you're so busy. We can't do volleyball and everything. So which one do you want to triple down on? And sometimes it's almost not even like a specialization function. I think maybe Jason is for the ones that want to go next level, I think it is. I think sometimes parents might do that because it's more of a time function.
I can't disagree.
You could only do this much. Well, if they can, that doesn't take me out as a parent from having some responsibility to go and fill the gap.
Yeah.
Instead of putting them into whatever. So great. All right, here we go.
I think to add to that too, like that's something I've seen a lot with kids. I mean, you get kids that are juniors, seniors that are stud players that, they just have no desire to play anymore, and they go to college. And it's, whether they started too young or whatnot. But I think another big thing we forget is almost all sport is we just made it up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, well, a baseball player should be doing this. Well, who says baseball's the right thing we should be doing? You know what I mean? Like, and I've had this discussion with my mother about a month ago. Like, I was a pitcher for 20 years. Like, that wrecked my hips and my shoulders. There's a lot of things I'm working on right now to rebalance it. I'm feeling a lot better in doing it. But at the same time, my mom, she almost got upset when I first told her, like, that's one of the worst things you can do in sport is to pitch. And she's like, well, you would have never changed your mind. I'm like, you're right, I wouldn't have. But the thing that would have been nice to know or do that we just didn't know at the time too, I mean, you're talking 20 years ago almost, was, we have things in place now. We can kind of recorrect some of those, and fix some of the issues we have where you don't develop some of these asymmetries or imbalances quite as severely as you do if you start specializing at 10, 12 years old. Like you said, you get really strong in these positions, and then we got to teach you how to get strong in other positions too, and to move through other range of motion. So with all my kids, when they come in and train with me, I mean, really, we don't start specializing any training until they're probably a senior, junior maybe a little, but even then I want to fill a lot of the things they're not getting through their sport and training, because a lot of them are training schools too at that point. So, then I'm working on things that they're not getting done at school so I can keep them well-rounded.
And here's a question. How many of those kids that you're not specializing in come back and say, I've gotten better at my sport because they move better, because they're doing other things and their bodies can actually open up and do better things?
All of them. I have not had one that at least consistently comes, right? They consistently just put in the work, every single one of them.
And yet you haven't worked on that sport skill at all.
Nope. And how many runners come back from just doing the CrossFit group training that we do, and they haven't run at all, and then they go run a 5K and they PR. Yep. How'd I do that? I'm like, well, you can sprint now, and you did box jumps, which I'm sure weren't part of your running regimen for a while. It's like all these things that it wasn't a direct correlation, so we just cut it out altogether.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what's your third?
My last one, I'm going to step out of the box a little bit again and go with the sleep aspect. I think that's another thing. Huge. Especially as I've got this Whoop tracker and I'm trying to record a lot more of my work now. It's a biofeedback tracker. It gives me a lot of information in my phone, but the more I'm seeing, and I thought I was doing well, it's not near as well as I thought, and the more I talk to these kids, like such an inconsistent bedtime, they're on their TVs, their phones up until they're going to bed, and all that blue light that throws off your natural circadian rhythm. Our bodies are designed to start to get tired or sleepy when the sun goes down and to begin to wake up or get ready for the day when the sun comes up. And you have these kids that are staying up till 3, 4, 5 a.m. gaming with kids across the world. Yeah. And next thing you know, they're sleeping until noon, 1 p.m. And it's like, then they're so tired, even though they're getting enough sleep. And it's like, well, you've thrown your body out of whack, out of rhythm, If we can get at least a relatively consistent bedtime and make sure we're getting good quality sleep, get off your phones, get off the TVs at least a half hour to an hour before bed, get your body to get in that state where it is a little more sleepy or restful, start to calm down the nervous system. Another big thing I think a lot of people miss out on too, or don't understand, is the darker that it is, or the darker room you're in, the more melatonin your body naturally produces. And so if I've got all this light going on in the room, if I go to bed and I've got lights around the room, that limits some of my body's ability to produce melatonin to put me and keep me asleep. So I think that's a big window I'm seeing in kids more recently than ever. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with the technology, the social media, the video games, things like that.
I think it's a cultural disease that the parents are contributing to.
Yeah.
Because the parents going and going and going. I mean, you're the leader of a household casts the biggest shadow. So mom and dad, or whatever your guardian situation looks like, that casts the greatest shadow over. So your behavior is going to imprint itself on your kids.
Oh yeah.
So when you're up late and you're watching your shows and you're doing this and you're on your phone and everything else, but you don't do that, son or daughter. Like you don't. It's like the kids are listening to the whole of you. They're not just listening to what you say. Actually, they're mostly listening to your behavior.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think the same is true for when you go to youth sports and you see all the parents lumber up in that poor lawn chair that's just like getting work. And you're just like, man, it's like they're out there doing that right now, but so did you. And look at where you are now. You gave up on something along the way. It's like, be the one that's moving. Like, be the one that's moving. And then will the sleep come? Yep. And yes, 2 of my kids have Whoop bands on there. We just make it fun, like the external reward. I'm like, what do you got? Oh, Dad, I beat you on sleep last night. Hey, Dad, I beat you on. And then my son has to have he has to actually have more sleep to get a better percentage than me just due to our age.
That's awesome.
So it's kind of cool that it's like a level playing field on there. It's like, well, you only got 7. How are you? I did 8. How many? I'm like, look at your strain from yesterday. I'm like, you burned like 6 times the calorie. Like, it's not apples to apples in there, but I think sleep's another good one. All right, cool. So transitioning up a little bit. This is a question we don't get a lot, but I think it's behind the scenes, which is, how can strength and conditioning decrease the risk of injury in youth and masters athletes? So let's transition a little bit to both ends of the spectrum. Youth being all the way up, we'll call that all the way up through high school, maybe even into college. You see the same thing there. And then masters athletes. I mean, and we could think about people that were athletes and there's 10-year gap. And then they're like, I should probably start training again. Like that group of people. So why invest in this?
I'll start off with this.
Yep, go
I'll
ahead.
start with after the masters, and I'll work my way down. My wife, and I train my wife and several of her friends, and it's not for business. It's actually because I just care that they stay strong and healthy. They always ask the question of, why do we have to do this exercise? The response is always the same: because a fit body breaks less often. A car that is gone to a mechanic and is taken care of and is tuned more often breaks less often.
Right.
And so treat your body the exact same way. If you teach your body to move, to be strong, to be able to apply force, to resist force, to move quickly. We're learning now about gait and falls in elderly people. And what we're finding is that elderly people who can produce a lot of leg force and can move quickly fall less often.
And live longer.
And live much longer. Yep. And so it's a simple equation of, the more fit you are, both aerobically and anaerobically. I think that's the part that most Americans want to not do. It's not as easy. Going for a jog or going for a bike ride, people go, that's why you find far more runners than you do weightlifters. There are far more people that have completed a marathon this year than who've ever squatted twice their body weight, ever. And so it's one of those things where you have to physically challenge our bodies, and our bodies, we have these great levers for picking things up and carrying things and moving great distances. And what we don't do is use them. And so you want to prevent injury as a second-time athlete, or as a coming around again saying you want to get fit. Start slow, move well, pick things up, and do it continuously.
I like it. What'd you add to that, Eric?
So I want to add to that, especially as I'm entering my master's year this year.
Old man.
Yep. Become a master's weightlifter this year. And I'll tell you, the thing that I've really found with me too is really letting the ego get out of the way as a master's athlete. A lot of times I had to just do that these past couple weeks. A lot of times we look at where we were at one point and we think we should be there already. Right? Or we should just be there. Well, the time when I was squatting and lifting the most weight I was a competitive weightlifter training with I think in the weight room, I had 10 people that were in their top 10 in their respective weight classes down in North Carolina, right? Like, I mean, I was the low man on the totem pole, and I was lifting way more weight than what I can do now, you know? And it's one of those, but at the time I was training 2-3 hours a day. I was putting in 2 hours of mobility work a day. Like, my nutrition was dialed in. Like, I was doing all this. I was sleeping 8 to 9 hours a night. Like, you have all these other things that you have to put as a priority on the back burner if you want to commit to doing that, right? And so understanding, and the thing that I've really found that I find relatively interesting as I continue building back up, is I don't need to push as hard daily as I felt like I used to. But if I can monitor that and work at like a 7-ish out of 10 most days, the day that I want to go hard, if I decide to, it's still there. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's there. But I will say too, with that being said, like, my movement quality's gotten so much better over time, right? Like, I have better range of motion. I'm able to stabilize my body a lot better in positions I never have before as well. And so understanding those foundational principles much better, and just focusing on those so much more. And some days I'm working up, I just don't feel good. I'm like, it's not there. I'm not gonna push it today. Program may call for something. I have no problem scaling back that day, knowing that the next day or 2 days later, it's going to be there more than I want it probably, So making sure that you keep that ego in check, and you don't let yourself say, well, I need to be at this weight. I need to just keep pushing even though it feels like crap. Or, this is where I used to be, so I just need to get back to that. Like, I do have goals to be stronger than I was at that point, but I understand it's going to take me a more steady long-term path to get there, because I have other priorities now. I can't focus on my time the way that I did at that point. I'd put everything else on the back burner, and it's just not what I want to do. It's not where I'm at in my life. And so I think understanding that in your own situation, how much am I willing to prioritize this, and then understanding, like, I don't need to push it every day. Keep that ego in check, and know that when you want to, if you move well, it's going to be there.
Well, and it sounds like with the question of where strength and conditioning can decrease risk of injury, I think a lot of people that start off in isolation, because I knew what to do back when I was X, Y, and Z, or when I was there. And sometimes they're the most calcified to coach, because I want to go in and prove something. I want to go in and show you that I know how to do something, and I'm not one of your normal people that came in here. It's like, man, it's like if you want the fast track to the emergency room, it's that attitude. Like, that's what's going to get you there. Versus, Eric, per what you just shared, which is, what can you ego manage on your own? If you're doing strength and conditioning in your own basement, like with someone, it's like, it is a actual profession. There are professionals that do it, almost like post-surgery for a shoulder. Are you just going to do your own PT? No, I'm not going to listen to him. I'm just going to do it myself. Like, it would be asinine to say that. Yeah. Like, I'm just going to go to the pharmacist and get a prescription. Well, which one? I'll just Google it. Like, it's just like someone would laugh at you if you would do something so silly. Oh, it's like, so when did you get your doctorate? Like, when did you become a pharmacist? It's like they would joke, but oftentimes when they do this, how many times are we talking to people? Oh yeah, I can't do all that stuff. Like, why my knee? From what? Rec basketball. Interesting. Like, I was lifting weights the other day, and I realized I strained my pec. And I'm like, I could see exactly what they're doing in my mind, pushing it with that one thing that they're doing. So it's like, I think the addition I'd have, how can it decrease it, as like a master's athlete myself, is I surround myself with excellence in the people that I'm with, and people that are moving well. So I'm having role models with me. Yes, you're responsible for your own ego, but I have a coach like Eric, and I have other coaches around here to be like, whoa. Hey, can I show you something? And obviously I'm paying to be it. Yes, you can show me. That's what you're supposed to do, is show me something. That's what I want to do. So it's constantly keeping my eyes on the prize, which is like, all right, what's your goal? Like, and the joke that I tell in the gym is like, all right, hey, remember, especially when I get the vibe, you guys know what I'm talking about, the vibe from someone talking. I'm like, hey, just so you know, one workout's not going to take you to the Olympics, but it will take you to the hospital.
It can.
So maybe we can just dial it back today and just blame me. And if you don't get enough exercise at the end of this, you let me know. And it's so many times like people are like, that was a great workout. Interesting. With a third of the weight that we were about to do. Isn't that weird? You still got it out there, but I think that that's something that, from an ego standpoint, I think that's one of the things people fear. Yeah. I'm going to start doing this on my own.
Yeah.
And they don't get, I think most of them don't even go get programming themselves, even online, which is it proliferates. You can do it. They just go do what they did before, thinking like they were before, and things start just breaking down. Wrist, elbows, shoulder, like all the things that break in the order that they break.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go. We touched on masters athletes.
Can I add to that a little bit?
100%.
So
that's why you're here.
I've been a strength and conditioning coach for 20 years in the professional ranks. I'm in college for 20 years. if I were to become a weightlifter, I would actually seek out a coach. I have been training athletes for 20 years, but if I were to go compete and I decide, okay, I'm going to go compete in this, or even I have tossed around the idea, and I know this sounds really weird, of doing a triathlon. I would actually hire a triathlon coach to write my workouts. I wouldn't do it myself, simply because I want somebody who is externally looking at me to go, no, here's where you are, here's what your numbers are, here's what we should do.
Right.
Does that make sense? And I would understand those things. I would have a good comprehension of what that person's trying to tell me, but I certainly wouldn't write it for myself. One of the things that I've appreciated about Eric and Brandon, Bubba, is that
Brandon coaches at the Arsenal with us as well.
He does.
In addition to his job at Westell. Yeah.
One of the things that I've always appreciated about you guys is that you write each other workouts.
Yep.
And I've always appreciated about those two. I mean, one, they're challenging each other. They know what the other's weakness is, and they always program the other's weakness. Yep. It's never, I'm great at Olympic lifts. I'm great at snatch and cleans, and so I know I'm gonna program Eric's snatch and cleans. Yep. It's never that way. It's always, your deadlift stinks, and so we're gonna pick things up and pull things.
I mean, to just build on that, that's one why I moved to North Carolina. Like when I finally was like, I want to get serious in Olympic weightlifting, I hired Travis Mash, who's one of Team USA's weightlifting coaches. He actually is head coach at Lenore Ryan University. He started a program there 2 years ago. But I hired him and I paid extra to get directly with him. I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm doing it, And then after working with him remotely for a couple months, I enjoyed it. I learned a lot, but I was like, at the time, his in-house facility was a non-for-profit. If you trained in-house, it was free. And I was in a place I was doing enough online coaching, I could pay my bills. And I was like, what, if I really want to get the most out of this, let's go down and get some of the best guys in the world in one of the best atmospheres in the world to get the most out of this. And, it's one of those things that if you watched me move before, I moved well, but there's just such subtle differences that made my snatch go up 30 pounds, made my clean and jerk go up 30 pounds, made my squat go up 30, 40 pounds, right? Like making those subtle differences. And so with that being said, Brandon, my brother, he's a 600 plus pound deadlifter. Yeah. Well, he pulled 575 5 years before he pulled 600. And I think 3 or 4 different times when he was getting close, we thought it was coming up through his training, him doing it himself, he'd pop his hamstring. Something would happen, right? He'd get a tweak, a strain, something like that. And finally, we sat down and talked to him. I'm like, dude, we got to just clean up around the knee. You got to get more leg drive. We got to stop relying so much on the posterior chain and get some leg drive involved. And it was something that literally took us a year and a half to rebuild. Now, with that being said, it was easy for me because I'm able to see him pretty regularly, and we send each other videos regularly and say, even if we're not programmed for each other, like, he'll send me, he's starting to do more Olympic, but now he'll send me a snatch. And I'll be like, you did this. He's like, well, I didn't ask, but thanks.
Yeah.
So we're always kind of hard on each other with that, but at the same time, like, we focus so much on the quality of the movement that we know that if you move better, that load's going to be there, but you need someone to help guide you to do that because you don't see that or feel that always yourself. A lot of times you let the ego get, there's just a lot of things that can interfere with that.
Well, and I think that's another lesson to take away from this, if you're listening, is choose your training partners wisely.
Yes.
Which is, sometimes when you don't choose wisely, you choose another alpha, and all you do is beat each other into a pulp. Yeah. And that's just a race to who can get injured the fastest, guys. Yep. Let's just do this, and then I did this, and I actually added this on. It's like that's not how it goes. I've even talked to people where I do pretty well in the gym, and it's like, man, it's like, how do you go so hard every day? Oh, that's easy. Really? I'm like, yeah, I don't. I'm like, why? I'm like, I give it like probably 2 days a week. Do I really put the pedal to the floor? Like, that's it. I'm like, why? I'm like, because I want to come back tomorrow.
Yeah. Yep.
I want to keep, not to just lift more weights, but to move again. Yeah. One time I joked, I was like, my recovery was so bad. Why are you here? I'm like, I'm here for the warm up and the stretching at the end. Like, why? I'm like, because I won't do it if I don't drive here. Like, I know myself well enough, but if I'm here, I'll do that. I'll do a sensible workout. At the end, I'll be doing the mobility that we do. And I'm like, I'm going to be better off, or I'll feel way better tomorrow. Yeah. But I'm not going to gun it in that workout. All right, so we touched masters athletes. So let's go back to the beginning, and I want to actually go to you, Jason, on this one to start, because I want to actually go into the collegiate sports ranks where, like, I mean, as any parent who sees a kid having some level of success in high school, what's their first thought? Oh, wow, like they can get here. And then you think of strength and conditioning, there's all these sports. You think of swimming, golf, gymnastics, these are like, help me understand, like, why do I need to be in a weight room? That doesn't seem to make sense for my sport. Like, I don't know if you've ever got that before, or even from athletes.
Yeah,
like,
I get it from athletes all the time.
Okay.
And the number one thing I tell them is this: how do you move? Like, what in your body allows you to move? And it inevitably comes down to muscle. The better quality muscle you have, the better quality your movement's going to be. Now, name one sport minus like chess if you're a competitive chess player.
No offense.
Yeah, no, none of that. I'm just simply saying. But name one sport where you stand up, move things, throw things, kick things, change directions, that being able to apply more force to the ground or to the ball or the implement doesn't help you do it better. And then on top of that, this is the one thing that nobody really, this isn't the sexy part again. It's how healthy do you want to be? Do you want to play that sport for a long period of time? When I have recruits into the weight room, one of the first things I always tell them is that my job is to make you strong, healthy, and capable of being on the court as much as possible.
I like that.
And then I look at the coach and I go, it's their job to make you play better. Because if I can keep you healthy, they have time to teach you to play the sport better. And so when people ask me, why do I need to work out? I'm like, well, number one, do you like doing what you do? Well, then you need to be strong. You need to be fit. And that's my job, is to make sure you're strong and fit, And on top of that, now, once we've got this strong, fit body, how about we do some fun stuff about making it powerful? And a powerful body moves so much different than an unpowerful body, And in sport, you watch those kids. Okay, you watch your kids go through middle school sports, like when hormones start to kick in. All of a sudden, you see those kids that now have that extra boost of testosterone. They go, "Wow, that kid can hit harder. That kid can throw faster. That kid can run faster." It's not by accident. They have adapted to that. They've grown into that. That's what strength training does. Is it allows you to adapt your body, physically adapt to the demands of whatever movement pattern you're going to do, and do them better.
Excellent. So let's go. That was awesome. I just learned something. I mean, your one-liners are awesome. It's so good to encapsulate it so people can attach it to it. They're important to have, but it's about how much do you like to be on the court? I love it. Great. What do muscle? I mean, I love those connections. So let's go one layer. Like we talked about, how does strength and conditioning decrease the risk of injury in, let's say, our early youth athletes? Because one of the things what people think is true is, well, I don't want my kid lifting weights. I don't want my kid doing this. It's not important that my kid do that. They need to be out playing. And then you watch the kids and they're not out playing. They're sitting at their video. They're not doing what they said. So I guess, what's the case for strength and conditioning for youth athletes?
So I actually applied that question to a biomechanics professor at Ball State before he left, Dr. Eric Dugan.
Excellent.
We weren't talking about kids at the time. It transitioned into kids. We were talking about plyometrics and how, I was under the assumption, we've all read the books where it says you need to be able to squat 1.5 times body weight before you start doing plyometrics. And we talked about that, and Dugan looks at me and goes, "Hey, how much do you think strike force is when you run? Just running." And I go, "I don't know." He's like, "At least 1.5 times. You're going to tell a kid not to run until they can squat twice their body weight or 1.5 times their body weight?"
Interesting.
Yeah.
And he goes, "That's a waste of your time, man." He goes, "You have to be able to run, and strike forces are high." Now, let's talk about weightlifting. Most parents will come in and go, "Oh, I don't want to stunt my kid's growth by having them lift weights when they're young." I'm like, "Can your kid squat 3 times body weight? But you allow them to jump off a box or jump and change directions and play sports. The vertical forces they're going to incur the body, like the amount of energy that's going to the body every time they hit the ground, is way more than anything they'll ever deadlift, squat, clean, bench, press, whatever. They're never going to achieve those forces in the weight room. They're not, at that age, they're never going to achieve those forces in the weight room. And so saying they're going to damage a growth plate in the weight room is, one, if it happens, it's because of poor coaching. It has nothing to do with what the kid did, about the amount of weight the kid lifted. There has never been a kid, in my knowledge, there has never been a kid that has picked up enough weight to damage a growth plate, outside of, and I'm sure there's somebody out there that go, "Well, my kid had osteoporosis and that's what did." I'm like, okay, that's a very special case. A normal, healthy young child, they're never going to damage a growth plate because they can't pick up enough weight physically. They have a built-in barometer of, "Ow, that hurts." And that's what's going to stop them. "Oh, that's hard." That's what's going to stop them. And so that's what keeps them safe. And so any parent that comes to me and says that, I don't want my kid in the weight room because they're going to damage their growth plate or they're going to get hurt, I would say, if they get hurt, that is the problem of the coach. So that's why you need to find a good coach. A good coach is never going to put your child in any harm's way before they, to get hurt. And if, as far as what they pick up, they're never going to pick up enough weight to physically damage their growth plates.
And also I think it connects me back when I think about when I watch like middle school, like basketball is what just came over with. You can even see it in football, but I look at how fast a kid is and the size of their legs and like, cause that start force, like you don't even think about that, like playing down. I'm like, well, their ankles and knees are going to be destroyed. Like I just can see it versus the kids that are more filled. Like you can tell that they're doing something. I mean, natural genetics, they can have some too from doing it, but you can just see the kids. I'm like, what happens? I'm like, this kid's not going to be a problem in a year. I'm like, why? I'm like, they're going to barely be on the court.
Yeah.
Like why? It's just because you can see it. And sometimes you see it with like loose movement.
Yeah.
Where they're loose. I'm like, man, if they could just get in and start doing that movement, kind of almost like movement. Some of kids, unfortunately, you have to call it that, movement therapy.
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
just training where I'm like, man, you're going to hurt yourself. You're probably already hurting yourself. Yeah, my back hurts. My hip hurts. I'm like, yeah, how old are you again? 13,
Exactly.
14. I'm like, and you think this is going to just naturally you're going to grow out of it, huh?
No.
Why you still play sports?
Grow worse into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess what's your take on that?
Yeah, so I mean,
So on
I
youth,
agree.
like this, I'll just restate the question so you know it's like strength and conditioning decreasing risk of injury in
Yep.
youth.
I agree. I mean, and that's a part of why we keep the program well-rounded is, kids need to be moving through full range of motion to make sure they have the capacity to get to them. You don't know necessarily what kind of position you're going to get to on the field or on the court or wherever. And so making sure, one, they have the capacity to get there, but then two, the stability to maintain there, On the flip side, I kind of talked about one of Julian's friends that was very stiff coming in, and we've seen a lot of positive change. Well, we actually had another kid that he's been doing some physical therapy, and a lot of the things the dad sent to me in advance, I expected to see a lot of stiffness. And watching the kid move, he actually moved, relatively well through range of motion, but he had no stability when he did anything, right? Yeah. And so that's a big part of why we, why he's experiencing knee pain is he can't stabilize his foot when he does things. And it goes back to that foundation. Our feet are our foundation of our body, and if we can't create stability in the feet, it's just going to translate up through the body. And so I think that's a lot of what I see is with kids, and why we do the things we do is I want them to be able to have those full capacities. If they get put in a bad position, I don't want to say you're not at risk to suffer a tear, because that's always a risk, right? But you're at a decreased risk to suffer a tear, a strain, or something that even if you do, now you have muscle there that can help rebuild and re-heal it faster too if you do experience an injury.
I think too, it's like back to where we were talking about like doing the Nebraska program or elite level. I joke even in my when I'm training classes of leaders, I'm like, well, like I'm here to learn, and they kind of you take it haphazardly. I'm like, hey, how good is LeBron James at basketball? He's probably one of the best. I can't let Michael Jordan, but he's good, right? Yeah. As good as he is at basketball, how good are you at anything? Well, I'm not good at anything at all. Great. How many coaches does LeBron James have? He doesn't have one. He doesn't have two. He has like teams of coaches for all these different things. And I'm like, isn't that crazy? And he's already better than us at anything that we're actually good at. Isn't that it? I don't think that's a correlation. I think that's causation. I think that there's a reason they do that, and there's a reason they're still playing at that level. Tom Brady could be another one you'd look at, and where like it's just like taking it seriously by surrounding yourself with people. And I think if you're dealing with youth athletes in strength and conditioning, and I have one more question before we close. I think getting the right eyes on them that can hold the youth accountable to the appropriate movement, where it's like versus doing it yourself, or as a parent, it's like I almost won't even coach my own kid.
Oh yeah,
because I'm blinded sometimes, just like I won't coach myself. Where I'm like, we're in a class. You've seen this before. If like Eric's coaching a class and no one's saying anything, I'm like, Eric, come here, watch this. Yep. Eric, come here, watch this. What'd you see? Eric, don't leave. Let me see if I did it. And they're like, why? I'm like, I'm actually coaching the other athletes on how to be an athlete. Why? I'm not figuring it out, changing my head position I have somebody for that.
Yep. We have so many people that are afraid of that too. It's amazing. They're like, oh, I'm glad you didn't see that rep. And it's like, you understand that you like pay me to watch you, right? Like that's what I'm actually here for, is to make sure you do it better and do it well. Like, so, I think a lot of people don't take advantage of that.
Well, let's close. I want to close with this question. And I think this is a good takeaway. I had a few more, but we're kind of coming up on time. Okay. And the question is this. All right. Where's that? So what are the things or three questions or one question, if you will, let's just go with a question or two, that I should be asking my sons and daughters' coach to ensure they're getting the best training to stay injury-free? So let's just assume in most cases that coach is probably coupling out of here's some strength program, or here's some like ladder drill stuff, or here's some of this and that and the other thing. And the coach is kind of handling it all, which is more common probably in like middle school, maybe even in a lot of high schools that don't have enough room. They don't have a dedicated strength and conditioning coach, maybe a lot less so in college. So what are those key questions, those 1 or 2 questions that are going to, let's be honest, the most important thing is that my student, my athlete's going to stay safe.
Yeah.
Yep.
Eric, what do you expect a parent to ask you?
Well, I guess for me, what I would like parents to ask me, or what I would ask is, what's your goal this season? Right? Like, because from there, then I can start getting a feel of where your head's at and what you plan on doing with kids. And then how do you plan on accomplishing those things? Right? We want to win a championship. All right. So how do you plan on doing that? Well, we're just going to run till we can't stand up. Okay. We're going to go to another team. We're going to elsewhere. You know what I mean? Like, but I think understanding where the coach's goals align for the season, I think that can help you build more questions or build off of. But that's something that I love when people ask me that. They're like, so what's, you're the professional here, but what's your goal with him when he comes, right? And I'm like, I want to make him a well-rounded athlete that when he goes to whatever sport he wants to do, the coach can make him better at those skills, and he's less likely to get hurt.
And I don't think people understand the importance of what he just said. At any sport, the best athlete at any sport, you're not a baseball coach. I admit your professional skill level and knowledge level of baseball.
I coached college baseball for a year.
But you don't go into it thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna make this kid the best baseball player in the world. I'm gonna make this kid the best mover and the best athlete.
Correct.
And then when they go play baseball, guess what? They can actually play baseball. Yeah. So that's a question that I would love all parents to ask their trainer, potential trainer. What's your goal for this kid? How will you work with the kid? For me, it's when parents come to college, what I want them to ask me is, how do you work with my athlete? How do you get them to do what they're supposed to do? What is your motivational factor? For years, the ranks of professional or to college strength and conditioning coach was the punisher. And I hate to say that, but strength coaches were just looked at as the person that yelled at your kid and made them puke. And nothing was gained from that. And so I would love for coaches, for parents, when you go to college and you're looking at potential colleges for your kid, when you get to meet that strength coach, ask them, how do you coach kids? What is your motivational factor to coach kids? And what happens if you get a kid who doesn't seem to know what's going on? What do you do? What is your steps? And so
yell louder.
Yeah, yell louder. Make them answer that question, because this is your child that they're going to be working with. Does that make sense? And you don't want to send your kid to a place where, one, the strength coach is just going to push them and push them and push them, because they are going to get hurt. And unfortunately, a lot of kids do get hurt. The best part about strength and conditioning right now is that there are more and more coaches out there who want to see kids get better. And so it has nothing to do with their voice. It has everything to do with teaching technique, teaching movement, teaching those things, that the skill sets that they need to become a better athlete.
Well, I think that, and to wrap this up, is as a parent, I'd like to see them actually ask those questions.
Yeah.
I think, well, this is my kid's baseball coach, or this is my kid's swimming coach, and they're like, that's swimming. And it's like they send them off to they fail to ask the questions, and when the injuries come, then the questions come.
Yeah, it's too late.
There's a proactive role of a parent to advocate for your athlete.
Yeah.
Know where you're sending them. Well, in college, we want to really look at college. Look at where they're already at.
Yeah.
Are things happening now? I think parents are much better doing it in the classroom on a whole than they are on the field, where it's like, that's just the coach. Yeah, we don't like him either. Yeah, this isn't really. I'm like, why? You know what I mean? Why are you doing that? And I think I would close with how are you going to reinforce what that coach is doing? The parents are technically with your student more often than not, and they can do a lot to undo that. And I think the other thing that we deal with too is the strength and conditioning coach as a competitor with the coach.
Oh yeah.
Which you might have run into, and you run into, where it's like, I don't coach this, I do this so that they can be with you more, and they're there ready to go. And I think that the bigger threat there is just the time crunch of how much time these kids are on the court over and over and over without some of the remedial work to get all these things strengted up.
Well, I kind of want to add to that just
sure.
a little bit. That's one thing that I deal with a lot with high school coaches, is they think that we're coming in and trying to take over their program. And it's like, no, I'm here to be an assistance to you, to give you better athletes so you can do better things on the field, And I've had parents come to me that were D1 athletes that still in great shape themselves, and get a little cocky, and they're like, well, why should I come to you if I know how to do all this and we have the equipment here and whatever. And I'm like, it's not to say that you couldn't do a great job of what you do, But it's the same thing, kind of like you said earlier. Like, I'm not a baseball coach. I have a very high level of baseball background. I was a D1 baseball player at 2 different schools. I coached D1 baseball for a year. I have several friends that still play in the big leagues and minor league ranks. I've been around the sport for so long, but that's not what I do as a profession. You know what I mean? That's not my expertise. My expertise is in the strength and conditioning realm. Yeah. And so when my kid goes to play baseball, that's not to say I'm not going to work with him and do skills with him, but I'm not going to be his coach through everything. I want someone else to do that because they're going to be better prepared for that. That's what they do for a living. Right. It's not where I want to transition and go, And so I think that's really important for coaches to understand is like, if you have a qualified professional working with you, like they can give you better athletes. Even if you have a good base and you have a good program, if you can find someone that does it better for you, then they give you better athletes that you can then do better things on the field with.
100%. Well, we are over an hour.
Oh, good.
Isn't that go fast?
That did not take that time.
It does not go fast when you're talking about things you love. So, Coach Roberson,
thank you.
Thanks for being with us today. Coach Eric, as always, it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
So please, when you watch this, if there was any remedial value in anything that we came up with, I mean, these are 2 very, very credible resources, 2 men that I trust very, very much. And even if there's a part, you watch this and there's like, hey, look at minute like 22, they talk about this. We'll try to put some show notes on there that kind of navigate you through what we talked today if you don't have time and you just want to have that section. At any given time, if you're on the MuncieCrossFit.com website and you want to talk to Coach Eric, there's a little app that comes up in the corner. It's called the Drift app. It'll pop up. That's going right to Eric's phone. So use it and abuse it. And we'll try to figure out the problem afterwards if you have questions. And hopefully we can find excuses to have Coach Roberson around more often because I know I'd love that.
Yeah.
Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.